So this is Typo Negative's lead singer, Peter Steele. He was known for having a very rough childhood, very all that. We're getting to more of the psychology, metaphysical part of the stream, but it's also music related as well. Right? He had a very rough childhood, all that. He grew up in an extremely religious home, and usually a lot of people who grow up in an extremely religious home typically aren't religious most of their life. They kind of scares them away from it, right? Everything he didn't know about Typo Negative's Peter Steele, and he would have he had super dark humor too, to like help cope with like his like trauma and stuff. So let's read some of this article about him. Passing away on this day 11 years ago, take a look into the life and tragic fate of one of the metal's most intriguing frontmen. He was very intriguing because like his like, you know, what's it called? His dark humor. To metal fans across the globe, the gothic metal genre was pioneered and centered solely around the Typo Negative frontman, Peter Steele. With his haunting baritone vocals, vampiric image, and the unmissable 6 feet 8 inch stature. He's a titan. Look at that. It was unsurprising that Steele captured the world by storm and steered metal into a new direction with his sound. Yet, behind the fame of Typo Negative, there remained one of the most tragic backstories in the history of the genre that few knew the full extent of. Born Petrus Thomas Bartzik, I don't know how to pronounce that. The musician was raised in Brooklyn to a strong Catholic family, of which he was the youngest of 6 children. Although a self-proclaimed atheist for the majority of his life, these Catholic origins were returned to his music shortly before he met his tragic end. He was an atheist for most of his life, and we typically see that with people who grew up religious and were kind of forced into it. You can't really force people into the religion. That's how they grow resentment for it, and they kind of grow resentment for you as well, right? Sorry, this music just really pissed me off. Okay, all right. He kind of came back to it at the end of his life, kind of like Young did, right? Before creating Typo Negative, few realized that the musician was part of 2 other bands, a heavy metal band named Fallout and a politically incorrect thrash band named Carnivore, entitled Carnivore. Okay, let me look at this. Hold on. Why is it politically incorrect? Is it politically incorrect in the media's standards, or is it like genuinely politically incorrect? Like, let me see. Okay, hold on. I don't know why I'm using that browser. I'm gonna use this browser. So it's called Carnivore. Okay, heavily influenced by the New York hardcore scene, the post-apocalyptic theme that dominated the first album carried the parts. Lyrical theme expanded on to describe human society, or a lack one between imagery, World War III, 4 and 5. All the lyrics included nihilism, anti-religious sentiment, cynicism, and explicit but tongue-in-cheek depictions of gore and despair. Song titles such as Jesus, Race War, The Thermonuclear Warrior, and God is Dead reflected these themes. I mean, this sounds like a pretty average metal band, right? Okay, it says it kind of right here. Heavy metal band, thrash metal band entitled Carnivore. In both these acts, Steele immediately established himself as a bassist and a vocalist, using his lyrics to discuss issues including racism, misogyny, race, and war. Yet, experiencing little longevity or success from these bands, Steele instead set his sights on a new, darker project that would follow a path unlike most of the scene. Pairing up with his childhood friend Josh Silver in 1989, the duo set their eyes upon the up-and-coming gothic genre and formed a new band called Repulsion, later to be renamed Typo Negative. Inspired predominantly by the sinister motives of Black Sabbath and the songwriting ability of the Beatles, Steele took a melodic 1970s sound and incorporated darker, more insidious undertones to make it distinctive to him. This was taken to the next level by discussing deeply personal subject matter within the lyrics and tackling taboo themes including addiction, death, and heartbreak in each track, whilst generating a name for themselves in the underground scene and helping formulate the gothic metal genre. Few knew that during this period, the frontman was still working full-time for the Department of Parks and Recreation. Based in New York City throughout his life, when not working on music, Steele was employed to drive garbage trucks, snow plows, along with a self-proclaimed lifestyle of excess in all aspects. The health of Steele began to deteriorate. This escalated to the point where his lavish demands forced the other bands to only plan short-term events out of fear for the vocalist's fate. One of the most prominent issues at the time came from the frontman's dependency on alcohol. Whilst initially presumed to be derived from enjoyment, it later emerged that the addiction stemmed from Steele's ongoing struggle with the nerves and stage fright, an issue that he was never able to overcome. Yeah, a lot of people can get addicted to alcohol because they don't want to feel the adrenaline pump and the fear they get over doing something uncomfortable, like getting on stage. That's not very comfortable for a lot of people, right? So they abuse drugs so they can get through it. Gradually evolving their sound as they drew larger audience, Steele became set on proving that the band could accomplish more than a simple gothic sound, incorporating more grandiose aspects. The band's discography began to dabble in genres including hardcore, thrash, and industrial metal for the first time. Despite running the risk of losing their original fan base, the risk paid off in excess, and Typo Negative was seen as more diverse than had initially given them credit for. Now with an even wider audience, the band accelerated into a new level of success and sold over 2.5 million albums collectively. That's a W. That's really hard to do. However, in the same time, personal battles and his excess lifestyle seemed to go from bad to worse. Having already attempted suicide, posed nude for a 1995 edition of Playgirl, overdosed and faked his own death. By the mid-2000s, it came as a shock to both fans and band members alike when the singer made a sudden, pivotal shift into sobriety. Sober, optimistic, and determined to lead the typo negative into bigger and better things for the first time, Steele was considering the long-term plans for the band, enthusiastically writing new material for the upcoming eighth album and embracing his Roman Catholic roots. The band decided to follow in the footsteps of Motorhead and aspired to leave a lasting legacy. However, in an act of tragic irony, despite his newfound enlightenment, following year, the frontman fell severely ill, expecting major health issues after contracting the flu. Matters were only worsened by stress caused by the ongoing illness of his pet cat. Then, suspected to have relapsed into alcoholism shortly after, Steele's concerning lifestyle became rampant once more, leading to the singer suffering a fatal aortic aneurysm at his home on April 14th, 2010. So yeah, a lot of drug abuse on his life because a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma. So we're gonna watch the video, the psychological breakdown of Peter Steele. Hey, let me put it in this browser. And this is more like a mainstream kind of psychology. I'll spin a Jungian lens if I can add any into this, right?
Take deep dives into the philosophy and psychology behind the songs and artists that rocked the world. My name is Nina, and today we're going to be doing a personality analysis of Peter Steele, who was best known as being the frontman of the gothic metal band Type O Negative. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible, but I'm not going to lie, I am a huge fan. In fact, Type O Negative is a band that I got to see live on many, many occasions, and their album October Rust is one of my favorite albums of all time. In fact, I'm going to be doing a full analysis of that album on the channel in the near future, so definitely check back for that. But what we can gain from assessing someone's personality is a better picture of who they were as a person. It can help us to understand how they saw the world, which helps us to appreciate their art more because we understand where they are coming from. And I can tell you that Peter was an incredibly interesting person that was also fascinating to analyze. So today's video is going to be in 3 parts. I'm going to start with a brief biography of Peter and his work. Then I'm going to move on to discuss the characteristics and traits that I was able to identify by rewatching his interviews, by listening to his music, and by seeing him perform live. And finally, I'm going to speculate about his likely personality profile behind his gothic rock persona. I would love to hear at the end if you agree with my analysis, so don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Just a reminder that the analysis is purely speculative and based solely on my own opinion. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. So Peter was born in 1962 in Brooklyn, New York, and was the creator of the metal band Fallout and the thrash band before becoming the bassist, lead singer, and composer of the metal band, or really gothic metal band, Type O Negative, which formed in 1989. He was well known and even celebrated for his vampiric appearance. He stood at 6'7", he had long black hair and green eyes, and he had
Okay, I gotta do it. It said 6'8" in the article, but okay.
a very distinct baritone voice. Not only was Type O Negative's music the perfect blend of being hard and heavy yet still melodic and catchy, but it was also unique in that it cleverly combined pandering and sarcasm with the kind of dark and somber imagery that we would commonly see in gothic or heavy metal music. Peter's lyrics ranged from being incredibly personal to completely satirical, sometimes even in the same song, and he often sang about themes such as love and romance and loss and heartbreak, hatred, religion, and even addiction. It was also clear that although the band gained quite a following, that they never took themselves that seriously, and they also stayed very true to their aesthetic, which is something I think the fans really appreciated and was a huge part of what really drew people in. Peter used the color green as a running motif in his work, which had symbolic significance to him. Not only was it his favorite color, but it was also a reference to the green uniform he used to wear when he worked for many years in New York City's Park and Recreation Department, driving a big green garbage truck. He would often say in interviews that his time working there was the happiest time in his life. He was given the nickname the Green Man, and he also used that as a song title on the album October Rust. Peter would cite the Beatles and Led Zeppelin as being his key musical influences, and I think that's something that we can definitely hear in his music, especially in October Rust, because we can really hear those kind of Beatles type harmonies. Now, Type O Negative did release albums in both 1991 and 1992, but it wasn't until their landmark album Bloody Kisses came out in 1993 that they started to get recognition and commercial success. Apart from the band and his music, however, Peter really faced a lot of challenges in his life. He struggled with addiction and had a lot of personal loss. He also struggled with depression and spent time in both a psychiatric ward and a prison at different times in his life, so he had a lot of things going on behind the scenes. But it was actually his mother's death in 2005 that he said was the biggest tragedy of his life that affected him the most deeply. But despite all of this adversity, at the end of his life, he was really starting to turn a corner. He was starting to really move forward again. He was enjoying life again, and he was finally clean and sober. In fact, he decided to reform his band Carnivore and was enjoying playing with them and was planning to release new albums with both of his bands that year when he tragically died in 2010. He was only 48 years old. I know I was completely devastated to hear the news, and I think his fans from around the world are still mourning him. Something that really surprised fans, however, however, was that after his mother passed, he became religious. He considered himself to be a Roman Catholic, which seems completely at odds with his professional persona. However, he said he went through a midlife crisis and that his mother's death really made him contemplate his own mortality. He was able to move through the midlife crisis, but he said that he was worried that he was going to have to pay for all the bad things he had done in his life. So it really inspired his faith. And something that stood out to me when I went and rewatched his interviews was how incredibly complex.
You know, a lot of people use that as their argument against religion. Like, religion is just for broken people. Yeah, it is. It's not a dunk. It is, okay?
He was as a person. I also get the sense that he did not give himself the credit that he really deserved. I don't think he really knew or understood how talented he really was. He also seemed to have this layer of self-loathing, and I do think that some of that was for show. I mean, he definitely led with his self-deprecating humor, but I also think, at least on some level, that he was believing these negative things that he was saying about himself. In addition, I think he was just a very humble person. He never came across as being arrogant or pompous, even at the height of his fame. And I also think that he was filled with contradictions, which makes me think that even until his dying day, that he was trying to figure himself out. But we do really see these disparities in his personality profile. So for example, he was surprisingly soft-spoken, yet he had a razor-sharp wit. He was also shy and suffered from stage fright, but was able to eagerly embrace his role as a frontman for many bands and even posed for Playgirl magazine.
Yeah, so this would be him expressing his shadow, the repressed traits of the personality, right? So these things like being frontman, assertive, right? Being loud, performative, would be traits he suppressed, and his persona took traits of shyness and soft-spokenness. His music kind of just represents parts of himself that he repressed, and that's what a lot of people's music is.
He was extremely private and introverted, yet he was able to be charismatic and friendly during interviews. He was also incredibly articulate and intelligent, yet we would see him making
a lot of metalheads
jokes that a 10-year-old boy would make. I also think that clearly he tried to portray himself as being dark and bitter and aggressive, but I don't really think that was his true nature. I think if
you want to get a little corny, it's kind of how he felt inside, right?
he was like that on some level, it was more a response to being rejected in relationships and from experiencing personal loss and not really knowing
I mean, you can link it to that, but if from a Jungian lens, yeah, it's just repressed parts of himself that he's expressing through his art.
where he fit in this world. I actually don't think that many people truly knew him on a personal level, and a lot of his life really is a mystery. In fact, again, I think that he didn't even fully understand himself. It's also possible that being mysterious was intentional. It may have been a form of self-protection. He may have felt that if people really got to know who he was as a person, that they would not like him as much, which of course...
Yeah, that's also totally fair. Like, I think Jung would also say this as well.
Couldn't be further from the truth. He was actually incredibly likable. He was multifaceted, and he had so much to offer. I also think it's likely he would have been happier. And
what kind of sucks is a lot of people are likable because they want to be likable, not because they actually are, you know.
Much more stable had he found a soulmate and been in a healthy, committed relationship where he felt that he could be in complete trust of his partner and experience being loved unconditionally. Peter genuinely adored women and grew up surrounded by women, yet never seen...
Ew, L. That's fucking gross, dude. Ew, what the fuck?
To find a truly fulfilling relationship. And I think this may have contributed to his depression because he had a sense that he was alone in the world, even though he was constantly being surrounded by his fans. Honestly, there really was a lot of heartbreak and turmoil in his life, and I think he tried to deal with that turmoil through his sense of humor and also, unfortunately, through overindulging in areas of his life that he did find pleasurable. But the fact remains that he was a brilliant songwriter. He was a brilliant performer, and certainly he had one of the most incredible voices in the industry. And it's funny because on more than one occasion, I heard members of the band say, "Don't mistake our lack of talent for genius," but I actually think there truly was a layer of genius there. I think really Peter wrote music that holds up.
Bro, metalheads are fucking geniuses.
Is still mourning his death. So as promised, I want to take all of these factors under consideration and offer a personality assessment of Peter using the MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is what I use for this channel only because more people are familiar with it. But I do want to mention that I normally use the 5-factor model, and the 5-factor model includes a dimension that the MBTI does not, which is neuroticism. And I actually think that Peter would have scored quite high in this dimension. This is where we would see facets such as anger, anxiety, self-consciousness, vulnerability, and impulsiveness, which is all things that we can clearly see were part of his personality profile. And also, something else that could be seen as a disadvantage in the MBTI is that we have to choose between two distinct personality dimensions, whereas on the 5-factor model, it's on a spectrum. And I think in Peter's case, he was towards the center in a lot of cases, making it a little more challenging to select the proper dimension that he belonged to. But despite all of these challenges, I still think that I was able to come up with the MBTI profile that best suits him. So in this assessment, we're looking at 4 personality functions. The first is introversion versus extroversion, and Peter was clearly an introvert because introverts are reserved, comfortable being alone, and prefer knowing only a few people well. I think that fits.
Possibly his persona just took the introversion, right? His persona was introverted, but maybe deep down inside he wanted to be extroverted. maybe his shadow. That was part of his shadow being extroverted.
The next is sensing versus intuition. And here I'm going to go with sensing because sensors gather information from their physical reality. They are pragmatic and they trust their experiences over symbols and words. But this is one of the areas that I think he was closer to the center in. And I also do see elements of intuition in his personality type as well. The next is thinking versus feeling. And again, I think he is more towards the center, but I do feel that he leans more strongly to the thinking side. Now, thinkers tend to believe that the truth is more important than being tactful. They are logical, they are analytical, and
I believe in this, yeah.
Inconsistencies and situations. Again, we also see some of the feeling tendencies here as well, but I do think he was still more of a thinker. And lastly, we have judging versus perceiving, and I think he was definitely a perceiver because judgers are more settled and organized and like to live life in a safe and predictable manner, whereas perceivers like to stay open, they keep their plans to a minimum, they approach work as a mix of play and work, and they are open to new information. And also this dimension is tied to being open to experience, which I definitely feel that he was. So putting this all together, I believe that Peter was an ISTP, meaning he was introverted, sensing, thinking, and perceiving. And again, it was a little challenging to come up with this because he did use a stage persona and he really did not share too much. However, I do feel that many aspects of this personality type are in strong alignment with Peter. So let's go ahead and look at the traits that are associated with an ISTP. ISTPs tend to have an individualistic mindset and pursue goals without needing much external connection. They engage in life with inquisitiveness and personal skill and can vary their approach as needed. They like to explore the world with both their hands and their eyes and are both curious and rational. They explore ideas through creating, trial and error, and also firsthand experience. They also have difficulty in predicting emotions and tend to explore relationships through their actions rather than through empathy. They can struggle with boundaries and guidelines and prefer the freedom to move about and live life in their own way. They are often unpredictable, easily bored, reserved, humorous, and sometimes can engage in risky behavior. They can also uniquely combine being spontaneous with being down to earth and are generally good-natured. So I'm so curious to hear if you agree with this analysis, and if not, which personality dimensions do you think would actually
it was pretty good analysis.
The opposite? Please let me know in the comments below. But either way, I think it is such a beneficial and fascinating thing to analyze the artists we love because it does help us to understand the psychological lens through which they see the world. It's true that two people can have the exact same experience, yet perceive it in a completely different way based on their own experiences and their personality type. And I know, at least in my own case, it ends up making me an even bigger fan of the artist because I feel like I know them on that deeper level. It makes me feel a lot closer to them. So I hope it does the same for you. So I truly hope you enjoyed today's analysis.
So a lot of his work was kind of just him expressing his shadow, expressing repressed parts of himself. That's what most artists do. Right, that's what most artists do. And I don't know if this is true because I don't know him. Only he knows. He could have easily put a mask on for the whole world to be, he wanted to be this like a different kind of guy like he was on stage, but for the whole world he put on a persona, a mask to be more likable, for people to be more attracted to him.